It's a real pleasure to be here. I feel like I'm over the hump on my work curve. I've talked about 16 hours this weekend. I think I've pretty much shot my wad. But I have a notebook where I keep all the stuff that I don't know how to fit in. And maybe since I don't know how to fit it in, it's more interesting than the other stuff. So I thought what I'd do this evening was just sort of take the low road with amazing dope tales and cheap shots. And but before that, I wanted to do a little sort of heuristic exercise. And I hope no one will be offended at this. It's not a slam at the dominant religious powers of our civilization. It's just sort of an exercise in thought that I found amusing when I carried it out one night under the influence of mushrooms. And the idea that came to me was like this. Let me see if I can figure out where to slice into it. Well, first of all, there are things called solitons, and a soliton is a wave of only one wavelength. So it comes like a wave train, and it has a hump, and then it has a dip, and it just keeps going. It's like it only happens once. And I'm really interested in things that only happen once because they're so unusual. Are you out there? How's that? Okay, so I was thinking about the Immaculate Conception, and I was thinking what an unusual event this was, and how peculiar it would be if this highly improbable event had never occurred in the first place. And I thought I would spin this out for you this evening more as an exercise in looking at my method rather than as a serious proposition. In other words, I don't believe what I'm saying, nor do I suggest that you believe it. It's more like a toy made out of ideas and language. Okay, so with that caveat, here's sort of the notion. The traveling soliton of improbability announced itself in the confines of my mind, and I watched this wave of improbability travel through space and time until it collided with the earth. And at that point, the Immaculate Conception occurred. However, because parity has to be conserved in all higher physics, these extremely improbable events have the curious property of actually splitting the space-time continuum. It's as though the event is so improbable that it can only carry half the universe with it into the domain of its undergoing the formality of what Whitehead calls actually occurring. Okay? So, at the moment of the Immaculate Conception, where there had been one universe, suddenly there were two. The one we're living in which the Immaculate Conception occurred, and a great religious leader appeared and founded a religion and so forth, and another world in which this never happened at all. And I thought to myself, how strange. No one has ever imagined the consequences of a Christless world. No one has ever followed that thought through as an intellectual exercise, probably because you get burned at the stake for it. I don't know, but we'll see. But I thought it was very interesting. if Christ had never existed, what would have been lost? And I don't ask this facetiously. Obviously, no genetic line of descent would have been lost because Christ had no children, unless you belong to the tiny faction of French occultists who believe that Charles de Gaulle, and you know all about that, but let's leave that aside. I believe that, no genetic line of transmission is then absent. What would have been absent had Christ never existed would have been the idea of Christianity. And so then, under the guidance and production values of psilocybin, I began to watch these two time streams diverge from each other. And in one time stream, I see the rise of Christian iconoclasts, the suppression of the pagan mysteries, the destruction of the Greek academies, the suppression of Roman science, mechanics, and this sort of thing, the rise of the Dark Ages as the Christian eschatology takes hold in Europe. In the other time stream, what I observe is no suppression of the pagan mysteries, no suppression of Greco-Roman science. And it's very interesting that the great unsung feminine hero of mathematics, Hypatia, who was stoned to death by Christians in World I, our world, and even though she was on the brink of the discovery of the calculus, had Hypatia been allowed to complete her work, mathematical discoveries that weren't made until the time of Newton would have been made in the 4th century AD. In World II, I saw this actually happening. I saw the forward progress of Greek science and mechanics. I saw progress in shipbuilding and navigation. And by a date which we could arbitrarily set at, let's say, 600, let's make it 700 AD in World II, shipbuilding and navigation had progressed to the point that the Greco-Roman civilization was able to launch expeditions to discover the New World. In World II, the New World was contacted not in the middle of the 15th century, but in the middle of the 7th century. And the Mayan civilization, which had been destroyed by its own inner contradictions by the time the conquistadors arrived in World I, was at its flourishing height in time stream 2 around 750 AD, when Roman ships pulled into the Bay of Tampiq. And then in this psilocybin movie of dual false histories, I actually saw a Roman emperor arrive on a diplomatic mission to be present at the coronation of Three Flint Knife at Tikal in 741 AD of our era. Cecil B. DeMille, eat your heart out. Well, I think you begin to get the idea. In World I, the postponement of the discovery of the New World and the expression of Christian values creates a stultified beer and wool society that nobody seemed to enjoy very much. In World II, a fantastic psychedelic civilization, which we can call the Greco-Mayan efflorescence, as European civilization and Mayan civilization pour themselves together. The mathematics of the Romans, the calendrics of the Maya, the science of Greece, the psychedelics of the rainforests of the New World, so forth and so on. A tremendous civilization arose in World 2 that by our year 1200 is able to land on the moon, while in our world, the streets of Paris are being widened to allow the building stone for the construction of Notre Dame to reach the site on the Isle of, in the Seine. So you see, one world is progressing much faster than the other. Now, this confluence of psychedelics with Neoplatonic philosophy, and also certain contributions made by the further fusion of this civilization with the Sung dynasty some centuries later in World 2, created a tremendously sophisticated civilization that, because of the presence of psychedelics in its repertoire of cultural machinery, it is able to produce a psychology centuries in advance of anything which we possess today. And as these psychologists, shaman, technicians of the Greco-Mayan, of the civilization that is the heir of the Greco-Mayan efflorescence, pursued their explorations of psychedelic hyperspace, they made an amazing discovery, a discovery which shook the foundations of their world. They discovered us. They discovered the presence of the split in the time stream. They understood what happened because their best people at the deepest level of trance were coming in contact with the dreams of psychotics warehoused in American hospitals in World 1. And they began to build an image of our situation. Well, then, at a period of time which corresponds roughly to our 1900, a great theoretician arose in World 2 who said, our physics has led us to believe that thermonuclear chain reactions in either continuum will leak hard radiation across the temporal barrier. And they said the implications of this are so disturbing that we have to carry out an experiment to see if it's true. So in our year 1906, in World 2, an experiment was carried out and a thermonuclear detonation was allowed to take place. And then the dreams of psychotics in World 1 were studied for months to see if there was any record of a catastrophe taking place. And when the dreams of people in the Siberian region were studied, they picked up evidence of the Tunguska explosion, which, as you probably know, was this mysterious explosion that took place in 1906. It was either a mini black hole collided with the Earth or a piece of antimatter. It's a very unusual event, more than a simple asteroidal impact. From that point on, the psychologists of the Greco-Mayan inflorescence had a tremendous interest in us and our world because they realized that we were preparing a very large atomic arsenal, unaware that the detonation of this arsenal would do serious damage to their world. And by 1950, when we possess hydrogen weapons, Earth in World 2 is the administrative center of 11 star systems. So it is the home world to an incipient galactic civilization. And they are perfectly aware that in what they think of as the time slums, barbarian races, unaware of the nature of space-time, are preparing thermonuclear weapons, completely oblivious to the effect that this will have on innocence in other continui. Just a minute. This, to my mind, explains the weird confluence of attention upon the date 2012. You know, we find in the Mayan calendar, the entire Mayan calendrical machinery is hinged on December 22nd, 2012 AD. Recently, a group of Hasidic rabbis decoded the first 5 books of the Bible to the conclusion that a world-transforming event will occur in 2012 AD. My work on the I Ching shows that it contains an algorithmic fractal wave that points toward a collapse of the state vectors of Newtonian space-time sometime in December of 2012. Well, what's going on here? Well, I think that we are very artfully caged. We are being manipulated from a higher dimension toward the expectation of the flowing together of the previously separated time streams, and that what lies ahead is an apocalyptic transformation, a completely mind-boggling recasting of everything we've ever known or thought. But it may not require the agency of God Almighty or even friendly extraterrestrials. It may be that, you know, I've spent time in the Amazon, so I'm aware that when you're on the river, sometimes the river parts and you never even know it because it's so big. And what you think is the opposite shore is actually an island in the middle of the stream. And this is what we have been experiencing since the Immaculate Conception. I call it the prodigal time stream. A rivulet broke away from the ordinary on-flowing flux of the universe, and this is the fall into history. You know, this is the strange source of our neurosis, is that we have been cut off from authentic being by the unfortunate collision of the soliton of improbability with the womb of Mary. What to do about it? Well, technicians are working on the other side of the wall to try and bring it down. Help is on the way, and the promise is contained in the 2012 date. I think that we can imagine the following scenario. You open an area on both planets, Earth 1 and Earth 2, let's say an area roughly the size of the Ukraine. And if you go to that part of the Earth, you can walk through to the other place. And so it's a kind of pickup. It's a kind of opening of the doorway between the worlds to let the poor lost cousins, that's us, climb back on the main thrust of forward-moving civilization. Now, I don't believe that rap. I just think that it's very interesting because it answers so many questions. Not that it doesn't raise a few in the course of answering them, but what it shows is the plasticity of thought, the power of the human imagination to create a myth that explains our predicament. I mean, if the story I just told you were to be true, 20 years after the flowing together of the two time streams, there would be 20-year-old people walking around who never lived in the world of the divided time streams. And when we would talk about the great day when it all flowed together, it would be like listening to people talk about the armistice of the Great War or some damn thing in the past that had no relevance to your own life. This all revolves out of the perception of J.B.S. Haldane, the British enzymologist, that the world is not only stranger than we suppose, it's stranger than we can suppose. Than we can suppose. That's permission to suppose right there. There are no constraints on supposition. Nothing is weird enough. The only rule is, that it has to somehow hang together. Well, the way you break into this weirdness is by breaking down the barriers of ordinary expectation and language. The whole psychedelic ocean is a swim with minnows and organisms of larger girth that are ideological constructs like the one I just laid out for you. And the way I think of psychedelic shamanism is it is... do you know that wonderful painting by Paul Klee called Sinbad the Sailor, where Sinbad is standing in a boat holding a spear and the sea is a checkerboard of clay-like colors all around him? To me, the shaman is an idea hunter, and he goes out into the dark space of mind with the puny tools of language, rational thought, pictorial ability, poetic heart, and attempts to take the measure of something stranger than we can suppose. It's reality. Every society that has ever existed thought it had 5% left to find out, and that the rest was under full control of its institutions. The fact of the matter is, we're whistling past the graveyard. If you push on any of the great pillars that support our worldview, you will discover that they are made of mush. I mean, science is a tale told by an idiot. It is. It is. The contradictions are so patent, the improbabilities so incongruous, that it becomes essentially no more than a pimp for technology. That's what it is. Shamanism means direct empowerment of experience, reclaiming your own mind as the final arbiter of what is real. If you don't understand quantum physics, it ain't doing you any good. And so you should have nothing to do with it. If the way you handle the problem of reality is by believing there are experts somewhere who are on top of it, I've got big news for you. This idea of giving our loyalty away to Time Magazine or Scientific American or something like that is very bizarre, because we are unable to confirm any of the realities that they talk about. I mean, who has seen an electron, still to speak of the bottomless quark? And yet these are the mythologies, these are the components of our supposed worldview. Well, how does this tell you how to button your tie or pay your bills? It doesn't. We've sold out for a massive pottage. Ideology is a tremendously disensoling force. The way you reclaim your identity is by reclaiming your ideological primacy. You are the arbiter of what is real. And if we want to change the world, we have to empower the means that return control to the social atom, to the individual, because that's the only authentic existence that any of us know. I mean, in its most radical remonstrance, I'm pretty sure about me, but you could be anything. You can pull the focus in quite tight. And this is because the nearer you get to the meat, the more existentially vital it seems to be. And, the psychedelics are the tool, par excellence for doing this. They connect you back up to the archaic vegetable mind that was in place at the dawn of history. Whether you like my little story about the Mayans or not, I think it's difficult to deny that something happened, that we have fallen into a peculiar place. And yet there is still the intimation of a transcendent possibility. In Finnegan's Wake, James Joyce, speaking of the red light district of Dublin, which is called Moycane, said, "Here in Moycane, we flop on the seamy side, but up Nient, prospector, you sprout all your worth and woof your wings. If you want to be phoenixed, come and be parked." This is saying the transcendent possibility is imminent. In Joyce's wonderful phrase, man will be dirigible. Sounds a little weird now, but what it means is that we will make collectively a kind of flying saucer at the end of history, the history that is being poured together at the end of this millennium because of electronic communications, because of drugs, because of urbanization, because of computers. Our boundaries are dissolving. We are entering into the post-print, electronic, feudal, pre-apocalyptic mode that McLuhan anticipated. And each one of us has the challenge of redesigning ourselves to slip more smoothly through the time stream. This is really what it's about. Redesigning personalities, cultures, families, entire global economies, because the acceleration of the future is building up as a kind of vibration. If any of you know engineering terminology, it's called Q-force. And as the shuttle breaks through the sound barrier, Q-forces build up on the leading edges of the airframe. In the same way, the historical vehicle that is beginning to move faster and faster through the historical continuum occasionally encounters the buildup of these Q-forces, vibration that is sending the message, redesign, restructure, redistribute the load, redesign the tension-bearing members of your machinery. And the only way that we can keep pace with the design demands of the feedback loops that are occurring here at the end of history is to avail ourselves of the psychedelic dimension, because that's where the data that is flattened in the three-dimensional world becomes expressed in a higher dimension that we can slice through with the razors of language. You know how by slicing through a cone, you attain an infinite number of ellipses, and though none of them is a cone, when you stack them all together, you reconstruct the original higher geometric object. Well, this is what psychedelics are. Slices into the stuff of being, where we then look for fossils or stratigraphic tracing or graffiti or hidden messages. We're looking to try and understand. And some of these ideological razors are satisfying and some are not. The Mayan time stream idea is sort of in the half-baked dimension. It's serviceable to a certain distance, but then, the fiction of it intrudes. But this is permission, inspiration to do serious myth building, to formulate the paradigms that will give structure to the future. And I really believe, I'm a strange sort of a paradox, because people who know me know that I'm a very unpleasant, cynical, caustic person. If you want to know something unpleasant about somebody, as Dorothy Parker used to say, sit by me. But I also consider myself an inveterate hope freak. I am the apostle of a hope so radical that it's been called shit for brains. I believe that the world is within 25 years of coalescing into something unrecognizable. I believe that human history, which to us seems interminable, is in the life of the planet no more than the wink of an eye. And I love to invoke the image of a still pond. That still pond at midnight was this planet, until human beings began dancing around campfires and babbling to each other. And at that moment, that moonlit pond that was utterly still began to churn and churn and churn. And that churning is the anticipation, the announcement, something enormous is moving beneath the surface of the water and is about to break through. And when it does break through, the churning, which seemed like such a big deal, will be seen to have been but as nothing to the thing that was causing the churning, the transcendental object at the end of time. Now, people say, why, since the universe is so old, several billion years, how can you possibly believe that we're about to undergo a collapse of the state vector within 25 years or so? Well, to my mind, we are not neutral observers of this situation looking in from another dimension. Our presence on this earth, in a city like New York, with the density of connectedness that we have achieved, is proof that some enormous attractor is exerting influence on organization in this world. You think that stuff like New York just comes? You think that's for nothing? You think that's like a pumpkin or a leaf on a tree or an iceberg? You've got to be kidding. It is a response to a tug on mind to organize. And this organizational process happens faster and faster. We can now see that we have burned our bridges, that we must cast off our moorings from this planet, that if this is a birth, if we stay any longer in the womb, toxemia is inevitable. So we must part from the mother. Who wants to? Nobody wants to. What fetus ever started the journey down the birth canal with heart held high and hopes shining? I think it looks like the end of the world. The walls are falling in. You're strangling. How do you like that? And the walls are falling in. And we are being impelled out of the cradle. The relationship of bios to mind is ending. Call it divorce, call it birth. The umbilicus is being cut. This is necessary both for the planet and for ourselves. It is true that the planet is the cradle of humanity, but you can't remain in the cradle forever. And we long ago made choices that can now never be reversed. We cast our lot with the imagination. We cast our lot with dreams. We cast our lot with the vast architectonic poetry that we express now as cities and that we will someday express as vast archaeological structures in orbit around the planet or implanted in dimensions that are still hidden to us. It's hard to face the fact that there can be no resolution between the steady state return to the earth notion and the path that we have set ourselves on. If we had acted soon enough, perhaps in the year 1000 or something, we could have stabilized the Earth's population and minimized and managed resource strain so that we could dream of a steady state. But as it is now, there's nowhere but forward. I always go back to that wonderful line of the Grateful Dead. You can't go back and you can't stand still. If the thunder don't get you, then the lightning will. That's our predicament. It's our challenge. And the way we streamline ourselves to meet it is you melt your mind again and again and recast it again and again, as many times, as many ways, in as many forms as is necessary to meet the challenge of the unfolding modalities of being, which are multitudinous, unpredictable, peculiar, and stranger than we can suppose. Thank you very much.